so intimidating. Wow. Ah. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my past. You've seen some of it on the screen. And then I'd like to talk to you about a couple of my favorite Bible verses. So that's where we're going to do today. Between the ages of 5 and 9, I was sexually abused by a lot of different guys, some in Akron, some not in Akron. And it really put me at a mindset of starting out young going, I am just a sexual being. And that's what I thought, that I have no worth besides being a sexual being for men. And that's what I equated men to. I was afraid of men because I just thought men are sex and men just want to do bad things to you. And it didn't matter what age they were. And it was scary. And I was young and I didn't have any self-worth whatsoever. And I had a rough growing up. I bullied a lot because I was real introvert at that point. I was really stuck in myself. And I was so scared. And so I never talked to anybody, and I got bullied a lot. And then so once I got to be a teenager, I kind of went rebellious, kind of in a lot. I was a bad teenager. And I was drinking and I was partying and I almost flunked 11th grade because I was really too high to focus. And so I'm like, I showed up just enough days to be able to pass, and I got all D's. So I passed. I'm like, hey, I passed. And don't really remember much of it, but I passed. And so I got a job, and I'm working so I can have money, because if you want to drink and party, you got to have some cash. So I went and got a job, and there was 2 guys that I worked with, and I had to be somewhere around 17. I don't remember exactly, but I think it's right around 17. They offered to give me a ride home from work because I had to get rides home. I didn't have a car. And they pulled off. We called it an oil well drive, but really out in the country, it's just this country back road that goes to an oil well. So oil well drive. So they pulled over there, and we were probably a mile away from my house, and they ended up raping me on the side of the road. And then they left me on the side of the road, and I know that I talked to a lot of women who've been in the same situation, and I call it the walk of shame because they didn't offer me a ride home. So I'm walking home, and I had time to think about everything that was happening, but I didn't think about, wow, these guys were really bad. I thought about, wow, I'm pretty crappy. So, wow, I can't believe they did this. That had to be, what the heck did I do now, to deserve this? So I went into this long string of partying and drinking and sex and partying and drinking and sex. And I equated sex and love. And to be honest, I loved a whole lot of people in my late teens, early 20s. It's like, and there's no shame now because God redeemed me. But back then, I was like, I hid it. And so I was drinking to stifle the pain that I was feeling. And I was partying and I was not an alcoholic, but I was as close as you could get without being an alcoholic. I butted it right up. And this was all before 21. So I didn't know Jesus, and I was self-destructive. And I look back now, and I know Jesus was working in my life at that point because he brought in a man who was almost as straight-laced as you could get. I mean, he was like the sweetest, most straight-laced man. And we got married, and I had a baby. My Lizzie, she's in the audience, and she was like, we were so excited. And we were married for a year and 1 month, and I was working midnight shift, and I came home from work, and I had found that he died in our bed from a heart attack overnight. And my Lizzie was a year and a half, and she was still asleep in our crib. That was probably the only comforting thing at that point because I walked in the room and he looked like he was sleeping. But I couldn't wake him, and I'm shaking him and I'm shaking him, and he's not waking. And then I'm screaming, and he'd been dead long enough to start rigor mortis at this point. And so I'm there. I'm 25 now, and I'm a widow, and I have no education, and I have no job. And I have a 1.5-year-old daughter to take care of. And if it wasn't for God, who I still didn't really know in my life at that point, if it wasn't for God, intervening and helping me, and my family coming together. My mom helped out a lot, paid a lot of bills until I could get through that stage of my life, that I would be completely lost at this point in time. So go 8 years later, fast forward, I didn't date much, fast forward 8 years later, I'm in the process of getting divorced from my second husband at this point. I'm 33, I'm in the process of getting divorced. We were not good for each other. Now I have 3 young kids at this point in time. I'm divorced, I'm angry, I'm bitter, I'm very ashamed because now I'm a divorcee. Not only am I a widow, now I'm married twice. I have this soiled past, and I felt like a giant failure. And that's what I told myself almost every day. You are a failure. You suck at this life, and you shouldn't be here. But then somebody saw how broken I was, and they invited me to church. And it was my first church, and it's still my church today. And they said, you need to come. And so I took my kids, and I walked in the door, and I stood there because I didn't know what to do. I'd never been to church before, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, there's going to be all these crazy, floofy women and men, and I don't know what I'm doing, and they're going to have these big words, and I don't know what to say. And I don't know how to dress. I think I even dressed fancy that day, which you could tell I'm not a fancy person, but I think I pulled out my best and just stayed. And there's a lot of times I wanted to leave, and I didn't. And people hunted me around. I have one of my pastor's wives, Kathy, I called her my stalker at first because she didn't know I was broken, or she knew I was broken, but she didn't know why. So she just kind of followed me around, and if I didn't show up, she'd be like, why didn't you show up? You know, and sing. But she kept me grounded. And so I found God, I got saved, I found what love really was, and that was through Jesus Christ. And I didn't know it before then, and now I do. So I got rid of all that hurt and anger at that point. Met a man, got married, and he's still my husband today. But I found out I was 8 months pregnant and with my 4th child, and I found out that he had an affair. And that was the end. I was lost at that point. I was broken. It was that pain that your soul hurts, where you can't even stand up because you're bent over and your soul just aches. And I wailed and I yelled at God and I had a tantrum and I'm like, I can't do this. And I was broken for months, and for months all I did was despair. In fact, it would not have been common to find me stuck in a corner of my house just in a ball crying because I had just lost my mind, basically. And I hurt. And that's when, in that time period, I got quiet, and God told me, he's like, I have a plan for you, and you are not lost, and you are not worthless. And so I got quiet, and this was the lowest point in my life, but that's when Jesus called me into service. He didn't call me into service when I was at my high points. He called me when I was broken and at my lowest points. So I want to go ahead, and if you have your Bibles, great. We're going to be in Exodus 3 for a little bit. Some of you may be newer to the Bibles, which is okay because I'm not that far in, but Exodus is more towards the beginning here. So we're going to do Exodus 3. And I want to tell you about Moses because Moses is awesome. And he had a lot of negative self-worth and self-issues, but I can relate. I can see that. So in 3:7-10, it said, I heard my people, God's telling this to Moses, I heard my people, they're in despair, and you are the man for the job, and I'm sending you out. And Moses, first thing, and this is at the bush, the whole conversation at the bush, burning bush, and he's like, who am I? And that was the same thing I said when God called me. I was like, have you seen my past? Nobody, yeah, that ain't going to happen. You've never seen my past. And then God tells Moses, I'll be with you. And that's what he said to me. And then Moses comes out, I'm not smart enough. And God's like, God, I'm not smart enough. And I said that too. I was like, I am new to this. I have not been a Christian that long, and there's a whole lot of people more educated in Bibleese and knowing where stuff is in the Bible than I am, and I can't do this. And God told Moses, well, I'll tell you what to say. And then Moses said, he's an arguer too, apparently, because he's like, Nobody's going to listen to me. And he's like, there's absolute way. All these people are not going to listen to me. And that's what I said too. I was like, God, I'm young. I have way too much skeletons in my closet. There's no way that a group of women or men or anybody is going to listen to me and say, why should I believe you? Because I know where you've been. And God said, well, you will go out and you will do things in my name, and that'll prove to them that I am here. It's not about you. And that's what he told Moses. And then Moses comes back because dude just likes to argue. So he's like, well, I can't even talk well. And a lot of theologians, I think that's the right word. I can't use the $100 words here, people. So if you, did I get it? Okay. But they believe that he actually had a stutter. And it may have been a pretty aggressive. So the dude really couldn't talk that well, to be honest. And then there was me. I'm going, God, have you ever heard me speak? I talk in like this country/urban slang. It's my own little mix where I leave G's off everything. I sound stupid sometimes. I talk fast, and God, and then this is where I'd like to read from it, 4:11 of Exodus, because I just thought I couldn't summarize this very well. And the Lord said to him, who gave human beings their mouths? And who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight or makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go and I will help you speak, and I will teach you what to say. So I didn't have to know how to speak. And it didn't matter if I knew how to speak these long, fancy words, or if I came in dropping my G's, sounding like I'm from South Carolina again, where I spent a lot of time. It didn't matter. And then Moses just finally goes, he's like, just please let somebody else do it. I can't do this. Please just let somebody else do it. And then I said to God the same thing. I was like, God, just please let somebody else do it. I don't want to do it. And that's when, and this didn't go on just like a small conversation for me. It was a little while. And then I had a friend come up to me, my friend Greg, and he's like, hey, you organize stuff. I'm like, yeah, I do. Pretty good at it. I was like, I can make a beast of a list. And he's like, well, I was thinking, can you organize maybe an event or so? And I think Greg was like my initial step. God used Greg to push me out the door because I don't want to say I wasn't obedient, but I was pretty darn scared. And I was like this. And Greg just came up, he's like, make this list for me. I'm like, okay. And that's what started the community volunteer group, is that's that one little step of obedience and going, okay, I can make a list and I can organize an event. What's one event? And that was 3 years ago. I was like, one event turned into a lot of events. And then, God sent Aaron to go with Moses and said, I won't let you go alone. He was pretty mad at Moses at this point. I say ticked off because it says depends on what verse you read, but it inflamed was in there, burning with anger. I was like, God was just ticked off, and all the excuses. And so he sent Aaron along, and Aaron went out and helped him, and they went, and each Bible's a little different, but they talked about the different amounts of people that Moses, just by taking that first leap of faith and taking that one step at the bush, and he ended up bringing out, including women and children, they think around 2.5 million people out of Egypt, and he saved them just by being the first step. Now, are we going to bring out 2.5 million people? I don't know, I'm not God, but I'd like to think that maybe we can save one, because one's just as important as 2.5 million. So you fast forward 3 years, and that's where my life was. And now here's where my life is today. I'm, a wife to a wonderful, redeemed man. He became saved after he found God. He teaches Bible studies. He's just a very compassionate, very saved man right now that God redeemed. And he loves me more than sometimes I deserve, to be honest. I'm a mother to 4 beautiful daughters. I work full-time as a claims adjuster, and I really enjoy my job there. And then I just followed God's calling for me, and I now run the ABT Community Volunteer Group, which is an urban street ministry, because that's where God wanted me to be. So what my ministry is we go out to the streets. We're like the foot soldiers. We talk to homeless. It's not uncommon for me and my kids and my husband to be sitting next to a homeless man eating pizza, talking to him about Jesus. I like to see a woman standing on the street corner and just strike up a conversation with them. Feeding people, clothing people. We're going to move our ministry real soon at the end of May over into the correctional facilities for women and try to get in. Yeah, Jill's over there. She's my helper with that. And try to get in to talk to them at their lowest point, because society really sees these women as dirty and too broken and too far gone for saving, throwaways. But really, I was too dirty and I was too broken and I was considered a throwaway. But God didn't see me like that, and he redeemed me and he loves me. And so I want to read to you real quick Jeremiah 1:4, because this verse recently spoke to me, and it says, "The word of the Lord came to me saying, before I formed you in your womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you to be a prophet to the nations. And alas, the sovereign Lord said, I do not know how to speak. I am too young. But the Lord said to me, do not say I am too young. You must go to everyone I send you to and say whatever I command you to. Do not be afraid of them, for I am with you and I will rescue you, declares the Lord." So there's our calling. It says, do not be afraid, whatever your calling is. My question to you is, what is God calling you to do? And if you don't know, pray about it. Get quiet and listen, because God's calling you to do something. Whether it's inside the church, outside the church, children's ministry, choir, being a prayer warrior, it doesn't matter. Maybe street ministry is your thing, but God's calling you to do something. And so I really ask you to just get quiet and think about what God's calling you to do. And I want to know, do you believe in God enough to step out in faith and say, it's not about me, but it's about you, and I believe in you enough to take this first step, whatever it is you want me to do. And I'm not expecting to move mountains, but just a little bit of dirt, and just start. That's all it is. Every woman in this room has a purpose. You just got to find out what the purpose is, and don't waste whatever that purpose is by being afraid and thinking all the negative stuff about yourself, because it really isn't about you, it's about God. So just be brave and go out, and I know you guys can do it. And it's an awesome feeling to work for God. I just want to let you know that. Don't waste it.